Hey everyone, what's up? So, I wanted to do a response to this video that I came across the other day. This is a video by Hunter Avallone. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Hunter Avallone. Most of the people who watch me have probably heard of him at some point. Maybe you haven't heard of him, or maybe you haven't heard of him in a long time, which I wouldn't blame you for. Essentially, Hunter Avallone used to be, for a number of years, he was a fairly popular, I would say center-right, moderate right-winger, right-wing YouTuber, conservative YouTuber, and whatnot. He did that for a number of years, and then around April, May of 2020, he announced that he was leaving the right and sort of did the centrist thing for a little bit, but then kind of moved a bit further and further to the left, and then now I think he calls himself a social democrat, whatever the fuck that means. Social democrat, supposedly center left, stuff like that. So he's shifted on quite a few of his positions and stuff like that. But I'm not gonna get too much into all that. But that's basically who he is. He's a political YouTuber, political commentary channel, basically. And he came out with this video called The Truth About Pedophiles, where he supposedly has a hot take on the subject of pedophilia. Now, this take that he gives really is not. It's not a hot take. I've heard this take before. I've heard people like give this idea before. I disagreed with it before, and I disagree with it now. But it's more like, I would call it more of like a microwave take, honestly. It's like, you get a pizza from Domino's, Pizza Hut, whatever. You eat it, it's freshly made and whatnot, and you eat some of it, but then you get full, put it in the refrigerator, and the next day you get it back out, reheat it in the oven, well, oven or microwave, one of the two. And then it's warmed back up, and then you eat it. That's more like what I'd call this take. It's not really so much a hot, fresh take. It's more of a, microwaved, oven, reheated take, essentially. But I'm essentially just going to play this video. I skipped about the first 5 minutes because the first 5 minutes of this is him going over Amos Yee and how he got put into prison and whatnot, and basically condemning him, calling him a piece of shit, and so on and so forth, calling him a creep, which I think pretty much everyone can agree on, that Amos Yee is a pathetic piece of shit and a fucking pedophile. No surprises there. The person who adamantly advocated for pedophilia and for pedophiles is a pedophile himself. Who would have guessed? Anyways, I guess we can get into this.
Peddles harmful ideas about children's abilities to consent. He is a piece of shit through and through.
Agreed.
But now, I want to broaden this conversation a little bit closer. Okay, we're getting closer to the lava here, to the hot take. Let's just talk about pedophiles more broadly speaking. The first thing about pedophiles that's important to remember is there is a difference between a non-offending pedophile and an offending pedophile. There is a difference between somebody who has fantasies about children or urges that they recognize are wrong, as opposed to someone who has these fantasies and urges and then goes on to molest children.
Right. So, so far I mostly agree. Obviously, I don't think that we should jail people for thought crimes and whatnot. Yes, there are pedophiles out there who are non-offending. I can agree with that. And good on them for recognizing that their desires are fucked up and wrong. I'll get a little more into this as we go along. But I think that most people sort of view pedophiles as a ticking time bomb. And in my opinion, it is better to treat all of them that way, pretty much. Even the ones who don't offend. Because, pedophiles will never gain acceptance. Like, never. Even people who are advocating for the positions that Hunter is in this video, even with people like this, there's never going to be acceptance of pedophiles and whatnot. Never. People like to bring up, gay rights and stuff and homosexuality and stuff like that. But the thing is, yes, at one point in time, there was a big stigma on both homosexuality and pedophilia. The difference is, though, is that with homosexuality, as a society, we've grown to accept it more and more and more and more, and have embraced, things like gay rights and equal rights for, gay people and whatnot. And we've recognized that, all homosexuality is simply being attracted to the same sex as yourself. That's all it means, And it's still two grown adults consenting to do whatever. And we've recognized as a society, thankfully, that there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't affect anyone but the people involved. And therefore, the stigma on homosexuality has gone down and down and down and down and down, as it should. But with pedophilia, it has not gone down. It's pretty much remained the same. For the most part. I mean, there have been groups like NAMBLA and stuff like that who have come along and who have tried to create bullshit movements about trying to about acceptance for maps and whatnot. But they'll never get off the ground. There's never going to be mass acceptance for that kind of shit, because you're trying to argue that somehow, like that relationships like that, because kids can't consent. They can't. Like, it's disgusting. Even if they could, it's disgusting, first of all. But I mean, they can't consent. You're setting up you're setting up a movement, an argument that you can't win, because all of the points are against you, pretty much. You can't argue that kids that young can consent. I mean, kids can't consent in general, but yeah. So, point being, there's never going to be, there's never going to be a movement of equal rights for pedophiles and stuff like that. It's just not going to happen. So,
illicit child pornography, etc., etc. These two types of pedophiles are substantially different because one has hurt a child and the other has not.
right, but for the ones that haven't, my question is, I mean, but when could that change? For me, it's like it's really just a matter of time before they do decide to do something, because I think what I was trying to say before is that there's never going to be mass acceptance of pedophiles. And so they might realize that, and then they might finally get to a point to where they're just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm never going to be accepted. This is never going to be seen as okay, so I may as well just, go and get my rockers off with a poor, innocent victim. So I would question, yeah, but when? Like, are the risks really worth it to do what Hunter is about to suggest here? But
So what is pedophilia? It's a disorder that, based on what we know right now, it's heavily suggested that you can't change from...
well, pedophilia is a paraphilia. It's classified as an abnormal attraction involving dangerous activities, like by definition. Which I don't know if like paraphilia has like the same like if it's classified itself as a mental disorder, but yeah, condition characterized by abnormal sexual desires typically involving extreme or dangerous activities. And it was previously known as sexual perversion and sexual deviation. So yeah, it's by definition it's a paraphilia, hence, pedophilia, paraphilia, etc. So
being a pedophile. Most likely you're born with that disorder that sets you up to have these unnatural attractions.
now, when I was initially watching this, I didn't think that was the case, and I was under the assumption that a lot of pedophiles were at one time victims themselves. However, I did look that up, and apparently it's not the case. There have been like studies done and whatnot more recently, and apparently it's not the case that, or at least not as many, as I thought, that like as many like pedophiles who were once victims themselves and whatnot. Because obviously, and I mean that would make sense, because obviously there are plenty of people who unfortunately are victims of that, but they don't grow up to be pedophiles themselves. So, however, that doesn't change the fact that it does happen to some. That some people who were, diddled as a child end up becoming diddlers themselves, because they probably didn't seek the proper treatment and help, and when they were able to, and so therefore they grow up thinking that, well, there's nothing wrong with this. They think it's normal, unfortunately, and it's a terrible cycle. But and yeah, I think some are probably just born that way. It's kind of like how we talk about psychopathy and sociopathy and like how people come to be that way. And I think it's just some people are just born that way. They're just born with some sort of imbalance in their brain, some sort of chemical imbalance in the brain and whatnot. They're just born psychopaths. Some people are just born bad. So
We understand
unfortunately.
then that pedophiles can't just not be pedophiles, right? So a lot of the times people want to talk about, well, what's the best type of pedophile? A dead pedophile. Well, hold on. There's a difference, right?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment. I mean, Hunter says it in a mocking way as if it's, but I mean, like, there's plenty of people out there who would agree with that sentiment, and rightfully so. And a lot of people are probably parents, and they have every right to be concerned and every right to be even emotional about it, because, some people are criticized for being too emotional when it comes to the subject of pedophilia, but it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's a very sensitive topic for a reason, so people obviously are going to get emotional. But because, like I said before, I mean, I think that most of us view all pedophiles as pretty much ticking time bombs, even the ones that haven't offended, and you could argue that that's not fair, but I mean, that sucks sometimes, life sucks.
Right? Again, between a non-offending pedophile and an offending pedophile, there is no option of be a pedophile or just don't be a pedophile. There is a choice there between should I offend, should I not offend? And this is where I have my hot take.
Which, again, really isn't a hot take. Again, it's more like a reheated take. I mean, this has been proposed before, but...
Okay. We need to destigmatize pedophiles. Does this mean destigmatize pedophilia? Absolutely not. There is never any circumstance ever when it is acceptable to engage in any form of sexual activity with children.
Right. Okay, so, I wanted to play that just so you guys are sure. I'm not going to, like, straw man what Hunter's trying to say, because the thing is, I realize that Hunter isn't trying to say that we should destigmatize pedophilia as a whole. Obviously, that's not what he's trying to say. Like, I understand, in theory, what he's getting at. He's trying to suggest that we should destigmatize, like, certain types of pedophiles or non-offending pedophiles. And if we destigmatize that, then it'll make it easier for them to come forward and get therapy and whatnot, which I understand in theory, but I would argue that if we destigmatize that, and we make non-offending, pedophiles more comfortable and whatnot, I would say the risks really outweigh the gains there. Because how do you know that they're not going to get, more comfortable than just decide to, maybe sneak something in and whatnot. So I don't think the answer really is to destigmatize anything. I would say the answer is to make, resources for mental health and therapy more readily available. And I think that, people who do come forward and say, yeah, I have these, desires and attractions, I think that they should be put on some sort of list. So like a sex offender list, except, like not actually like a sex offender because they haven't offended, but, some sort of list. If you want to get, even more brutal, I would say just build like some like communities for them where you put them there and they can sort of be amongst their own and talk to their own and whatnot. And they can just stay in those communities and, and they would be provided with like food and such and whatnot and housing, but, they would be cut off from the rest of society because, the risks outweigh the gains there. And that's just how I see it. I would rather view, all, pedophiles of all types as, quite frankly, again, just ticking time bombs. It's a matter of when. It's a matter of when. It's a question of when, So, oops. Hey, give me just a second. I accidentally skipped ahead. All right.
There is never any circumstance ever when it is acceptable to engage in any form of sexual activity
Right.
with children.
Right.
Children do not have the ability to consent.
Right.
and engaging in any kind of sexual behavior with
Right.
children is immoral, it is wrong,
Mhm.
and it is harmful.
Yep.
That needs to be stigmatized to the max.
Yep.
We're talking about stigmatizing offending pedophiles. Absolutely. If you hurt children, you fucking should be stigmatized, okay?
Yep.
Fuck you. However, if you're a pedophile who has not hurt children, that stigma works against you. Because now, if you go and seek out therapy, there's a high likelihood that you are going to be instantly perceived as a criminal. You might get reported. I was just reading a story about it, dude.
Well, I mean, then that's probably that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Like if you come to your therapist and you disclose that, then yeah, I do think you should probably be reported as a potentially dangerous person. Though, isn't there like some sort of a what is it? Isn't there some sort of confidentiality though? Like if you disclose something to your therapist, then but I'm not sure exactly, but I'm not really seeing how that's necessarily that's a bad thing, Again, like, yeah, not offending pedophiles who realize their desires are wrong and whatnot. I mean, like, good. I mean, that's commendable, but again, it all just comes back to that question of when. I mean, like, you're not offending. Well, good, but it's like you shouldn't be anyways. It's the bare minimum.
A couple of years back, that was actually a pedophile, and he was having these intense thoughts and urges, and so he tried to talk to a therapist about it, and the therapist scoffed at him and looked all afraid and was like, you can't do that, you can't be like that. So we need to reduce the stigma around.
Well, then it sounds like the therapist wasn't doing her job correctly, or wasn't very good at her profession. But I mean, I think that we should encourage not offending pedophiles to seek therapy and help for their desires and attractions. I don't think that we need to destigmatize pedophiles, though, even if it is non-offending pedophiles. Again, I disagree with that entirely. Again, I think that if we, even if it is for non-offending pedophiles, I think if we soften up on it, even a bit, I think it just opens the gates, for some heinous shit to happen. And again, I just don't think the risks are worth it.
Pedophiles. If you exist as a pedophile and don't hurt children, you need to be able to seek therapy. You need to be able to get the help that's necessary. Preventative actions need to be taken in order to prevent harm from being done to children. Try and think in two scenarios. What's more likely to happen? Someone exists who is a pedophile. They have not offended yet. They can A, seek out therapy, or they can A, seek out therapy and risk being penalized, judged, criminalized, reported.
Well, they should be. Again, they are disclosing that they are a pedophile with these attractions and desires. So, at the very least, they do need to be reported and put on some sort of, list or something, or, even given one of those bracelets or whatever, the surveillance things and whatnot. I don't think that's unreasonable. Like, you're making it out to seem like that's unreasonable. I don't think that is at all. Like, even if you are not offending, like, it's, again, it's not worth the risk because it's just a question of when. When are they going to have that breaking point and decide, fuck it. I'm never going to be seen as all right in the eyes of society, and probably rightfully so. So, fuck it. When's it going to come to that point, even for non-offending pedophiles? When they decide to say fuck it and offend. I don't see being reported as being a bad thing in this scenario. They can disclose that they're not offending. I mean, they have a right to speak up for themselves, but, pedophilia is stigmatized for a very good reason.
Get in all kinds of trouble, right? They could just not offend, but again, it's going to be really hard for them not to offend without also having some kind of a therapy or support group to hold them accountable?
Well, I mean, pedophiles can seek that to begin with, though. Like, they can go to therapy and go to, some sort of support groups, whatever, whatever it is you said. They can do that anyways, And if they get judged for it, or if they get, reported or something, then, that, again, sucks. It sucks to suck. Um, that's how it is. I don't, again, I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you could say maybe it isn't the most helpful thing, but it's kind of, it is what it is. And I don't think that, if that actually has happened where they get thrown into prison or jail or whatever, even though they have disclosed that they have not offended, yeah, I'd be against that, because we technically can't throw people in jail or prison for thought crimes, but, and we shouldn't, obviously, but, I mean, if they get reported and they get put on some type of watch list, I mean, I'm not going to complain about that.
As well, right? So that becomes less likely to happen. The more you stigmatize it, the more you make it so that pedophiles don't actually go and get help, and instead they go out and hurt children.
Again, like, it's stigmatized. It's not like, it's people stigmatizing, something dumb, like the stigma for homosexuality, for example, because it's an irrational stigma. Again, like I went over earlier. But I mean, like, you're asking people to, not stigmatize, pedophiles and whatnot. I know you said that you're not trying to say destigmatize pedophilia as a whole. I get that, but you're asking people to not stigmatize pedophiles. There's a lot of parents out there. That's a tall order, and I don't think it's going to be achieved. I really don't think it shouldn't. I think that, the stigma on pedophiles is perfectly justified. So, and yeah,
So we need to be proactive. Right now, the way that we treat pedophilia is extremely reactive. It's all stigma, and if you're caught doing it, you go to jail. That's good. You should go to jail if you hurt children. But we need to try and...
Again, the way that you're framing this, you're acting as though it's an irrational view to... It's an irrational thing to you put stigma on pedophiles. It really isn't. Do I really need to explain why? The thought of children being victimized, violated in that way by adults is abhorrent. It's awful. It's fucking evil. Yeah, people are going to be reactive or reactionaries or whatever you would say about it. Like, why do you think? Yeah, fucking obviously it's heavily stigmatized for good reason. Like, I know what you're getting at here. Like, I do, but the way that you're wording it and explaining it is a bit weird to me.
prevent that from happening to begin with. And we start by reducing the stigma around pedophiles in general. Simply people who have these fantasies, urges, or...
Again, I don't think that we need to, we don't need to destigmatize it, because I think that going soft, and I'm not saying that you're saying that, like, that we should be soft on pedophiles or whatever, but by even going a little bit softer on them, by destigmatizing it, and not creating acceptance. I know that's not what you're trying to say, but, I mean, softening up on them a bit. I would say, again, the risks outweigh the gains there. I think that making them more comfortable by any means is a red flag, a huge red flag. Again, I think that the solution more is to, put advisories out there, and say, look, if you have these attractions, you need to get therapy. Like, you need to get therapy for this. Like, you need to get help for this and develop coping mechanisms and whatnot, so you don't go out and do this. Again, I don't think the answer is to destigmatize certain pedophiles. I think it's to, again, make resources for mental health and therapy more readily available. You know, and for people like this too. I think that the stigma on pedophiles is perfectly justified and is exactly where it should be.
For attractions that don't act on them. That condition needs to be destigmatized just for the sake of pedophiles being able to seek out therapy. The less stigma there is.
Well, again, they can already do that. Like they have that option on the table. Like it's up to them. It's up to them if they're going to actually seek help or not. We don't need to do anything on our end. We do not need to destigmatize anything. It is up on them to get that help. It's not on us to accommodate them in any way. You know.
Again, talking non-offending pedophiles here. Be very clear. It's very specific with my words. They need to go to therapy and not be judged, and they need to be helped. And that is going to reduce the likelihood of them offending in the future. This prevents harm to children by taking this approach. So on top of reducing the stigma, I think we need to have a better understanding about what a child predator actually looks like.
Yeah, that's a shit therapist. Someone in his chat said that's a shit therapist, yeah. I think that therapist he referenced, again, I don't think she was very good at her job, because that's not what a therapist is supposed to do. But
because right now, partially because of this stigma that exists, it's very hard sometimes to actually recognize child predators, because sometimes child predators are so significantly different in real life from how we perceive child predators.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's like 65, 70% of victims are victimized by people they know, like by people even in their own fucking family, which is fucking awful. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like the guy with the fucking creepy mustache in the fucking white van. Like, of course, it can come in all shapes and forms. Women can be pedophiles too, Um, but
when you think of a child predator, a lot of the times the thought comes to your mind like, yeah, the creepy fat guy with the gray hair and the tank top who's all like, hey, little girl, you want...
Yeah, which, isn't always the case. That's more of a, a funny stereotype, but I think that, we all can recognize that, pedophiles are not just going to come in one shape or form. They can come in all sorts of shapes and forms, which makes it horrifying,
Some candy. But a lot of the times, child predators are right in front of us. Or they're people you would never expect. Or you would never think of this person as this monster that we tend to think of child predators as. Which, again, people that prey on children and abuse children are monsters.
Well, and also another thing, I mean, if there's a if there's a pedophile that's non-offending, and they recognize that their desires and attractions are wrong based on, just having some sort of empathy, wouldn't they too recognize that the stigma and the feeling around pedophiles is correct? Just a thought.
But sometimes that perception, being so black and white, can hinder our ability to recognize other negative signs of people that we might...
Well, usually I would agree that on a lot of topics there's a lot of nuance and gray area. And I suppose you could argue that even with this subject there is some. But, I don't think that necessarily viewing this issue in a black and white lens is necessarily a bad thing, But that's just my opinion,
Even love and trust being a danger to children. There were multiple run-ins I've had now with child predators that I later found out they were child predators. Yeah, but so first the guy who, our realtor, way back, I was a much younger kid.
Alright, he's just going into personal, skip ahead a bit here.
I think he got life in prison or like 20 years or something. And now came to light that he was literally kind of look the same, and they all are kind of these slobbering, creepy dudes. That can fuck up your perception of actual child predators.
Well, again, I mean, yeah, not... Again, child predators, obviously, yeah, are not going to all look and act the same. I mean, a lot in real life, probably a lot of them don't. That's how they get their victims. By acting like this, by acting like an upstanding, good citizen, I mean, look at Jared Fogle. He did Subway commercials. I mean, by all accounts, I mean, he seemed like a pretty alright guy. But then you find out all the fucking degenerate, devious shit he was getting into with fucking child pornography and shit. I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's not always, you know.
Even if they're right in front of you. Now, granted, I was much younger then, so that's probably not the best example, but that is my personal anecdotal experience of when I had a couple run-ins with some good old-fashioned child predators. Normally, I agree with you, Hunter, but this is a rare Hunter L in my book. Okay, could you please tell me then what's the solution? If someone is a pedophile and they haven't harmed a child, but they're having these thoughts, urges, and attractions, what's the solution?
Well, I think the solution, like I've said, is to make therapy and mental health resources more readily available, and we need to, put the message out there that if you are having these attractions, you need to seek therapy and mental help for it in order to better deal with it. Because we can't put people in prison or jail for thought crimes. I wouldn't want that to happen. That's what we need to do. We don't need to destigmatize anything. We need to make those resources more readily available and make it known to people like what you're talking about that they need to seek these resources. And again, if a pedophile is not offending, then again, like I said, I think that they too even recognize that what they're feeling is very, very wrong and that there's a stigma on it for a very good fucking reason. So that would be my solution. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but I would rather do that than, this idea of destigmatizing anything when it comes to this topic.
What should be done? It doesn't protect children to have a stigmatized group of outcasts living on the fringe of society. Anyone who's serious about protecting children from abuse has to be just as serious about the needs of minor attracted people. He doesn't mean their need to have sexual contact with children.
That's that term, minor attracted. So he's going over an article now. I think I'm going to end this video here. Hopefully he didn't leave anything else for the end. If he does, then my bad. But, overall, I get what Hunter is trying to put forth. Like, I understand, the idea in theory. I just disagree with it. I don't think that that's the way to go. I don't think, destigmatization, that's even a word. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think we need to destigmatize, pedophiles, even non-offending pedophiles. I think that the stigma is there for a good reason and it should stay there. But I think we need to make therapy and mental help make it easier to access, make it more available, more readily available. Maybe decrease, how much it costs and whatnot. Just make it more, accessible is what I'm saying. And I think that more should be, more resources should be put into, again, just making PSAs and whatnot and saying, look, if you are not offending, cool, but you need to get help, or otherwise, and again, not throw them in prison, but it's you need to get help for it, or if you choose to just hopefully, if you choose to just live your life and basically, never offend, I mean, that would be, preferable, but obviously, like I said, in my eyes, every pedophile is a ticking time bomb. It's just a matter of when. So that would be my solution. Again, not saying it's perfect, but again, I find it more palatable than this idea of, destigmatizing pedophiles, even if it is non-offending pedophiles, to achieve an end goal of them, hopefully, seeking help more often. So that's it. Let me know what you think. And, I just want to say this too before I officially close this out. I do know that Hunter, I'm not saying he'll do this with me and whatnot, but I do know that he sort of has a track record of smaller channels who, there have been a lot of smaller channels who have done video responses to him, and then he usually will try to get them on Discord and stuff debate them and whatnot. Even if most of those people don't really do debates and whatnot. And I just want to sort of end this by saying that I will not be going on to Hunter's Discord and debating and whatnot. I said what I have to say. If he wants to make a response to this video, if he does, I'm not saying he will, but if he does, he can do that. Obviously, that's his right. But I'm not going to be doing debate and shit like that. So sorry. But anyways, that's it for this one. Let me know what you guys think. Peace and have a good day.